if you have one. Exodus chapter 11. We're going to read the whole chapter. Exodus chapter 11. I invite you to stand. This is God's word. The Lord said to Moses, "Yet one plague more I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterward, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will drive you away completely. Speak now in the hearing of the people, that they ask every man of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor for silver and gold jewelry." And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants and in the sight of the people. So Moses said, "Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who was behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle. There shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there has never been nor ever will be again. But not a dog shall growl against any of the people of Israel, either man or beast, that you may know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. And all these your servants shall come down to me and bow down to me, saying, 'Get out, you and all the people who follow you.' And after that I will go out." And he went out from Pharaoh in hot anger. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh will not listen to you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt." Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh, and the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go out of his land. This is God's word. Thanks be to him. Please be seated. Now, let me begin by saying that what I'm about to say is not advice, but it's simply a description of myself. As a father, I'm a father, and I am an underwhelming promiser. That's how I would describe myself. That is, I tend to make very few promises. I shy away from making promises. And if I were to be cornered into making a promise, I set expectations pretty low. My children are very familiar with this, with one of my go-to phrases, which is, "We'll see." We'll see. It almost doesn't matter what they'll ask for. You know, they'll ask, "Can we watch a movie? I don't know, what's a Christmas movie? Home Alone. Can we watch this movie sometime?" We'll see. Can we go on a trip to that very expensive, fun place? We'll see. And I'll tell you why I use this phrase so much. I don't want to say no, but neither do I want to say yes. I want to reserve the right to say no. Because if I say yes, if I make this promise, that's too powerful. I'd be giving them too much power. It's too obligating. If they would hold me to my word, right? What little power they have, but you said, you know? And so I don't want to be locked into a promise that I won't keep or I can't keep. Therefore, this is my own policy. I'm not suggesting it for you. I'm just telling you my own logic. That's why I am an underwhelming promiser. Bible presents very much the opposite when it comes to God the Father. God is the exact opposite. He is an overwhelming promiser. And that flows out from his attributes, who he is. From the Catechism, the shorter Catechism, if any of you recall, God is, in his being, many attributes. 6 attributes are actually listed, 9 altogether, but 6 in his being. And one of them is power. What that means is that there is no can't with God. Nothing is impossible for God. That's one reason why God can make these overwhelming promises. Another reason is, from the Catechism, God is not only power, he is truth. So for him to make these promises means that they're as good as done. The fact that he is truth means that he is faithful and true. Not only can he fulfill his promises, but he will fulfill his promises. But there remains a question. Why does God lock himself into granting such overwhelming promises? There's a third attribute that I want to highlight from the Catechism. God is in his being goodness. All good things come from God. And toward those people he loves, God gives the best gifts. God says, I'll skip ahead here. God gives the best gifts. So to summarize, God is power, he is truth, he is goodness, and that's why he comes to those people he loves and he grants them these great promises which are beyond their wildest dreams. Let me give you 2 examples of what I'm talking about. There was a man named Abraham. He was very old. His wife was very old, and his wife was barren. They did not have any children together, and God makes this promise. You guys remember what promise he gives to Abraham in his old age? He says, I will make you the father of many nations. I'll make you exceedingly fruitful. This person who's not, when he says fruitful, he means many children. I'll make you exceedingly fruitful. He's had no kids with his wife into his old age. He says, kings shall come from you. Even kings shall come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring which don't exist yet. And I will be their God. Not just your God, I'm going to be their God. Anyone familiar with the story? It's in the Bible. Of course, if you're familiar with it, you know that the rest is history. It happened, right? Not just the birth of their son Isaac, but Jacob after that, the 12 tribes, Israel, kings, David, all the way down to the descendants of David. Which brings me to a second promise in the Bible. That promise was given in the beginning of the Old Testament. There's a similar promise given in the beginning of the New Testament. And it's somehow even more amazing than that one. That promise was given to an old woman who was barren, who's beyond the years of childbearing. But in the New Testament, God sends his angel Gabriel to a virgin named Mary with this message. You will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. He'll be called the Son of God. He'll reign over the throne of David, and of his kingdom there will be no end. Of course, this Christmas season, we're excited about gifts and all the holiday jolly, but that's what Christmas is ultimately about. Not that, but what I just spoke about, that the promise of the Messiah would come through a young woman, a virgin, unmarried, and somehow, again, God fulfills that wonderful promise. And of course, that promise given to Mary is the fulfillment of the previous promise about how there will be kings coming from Abraham's line. Well, the ultimate king, the King of Kings, Jesus Christ, comes from that line. Which brings me to this question. Why is God such an extravagant promise giver? I've already said it flows out of his character, but also God gives his people these wonderful promises so that they would live by faith. God gives us his promises so that we will live by faith. In other words, what are promises? If I give you a promise, do you have it right now? Do you have the thing I promised you? By definition, you don't have the thing I promised you because it's future, right? And so what are we supposed to do with these promises? I'm telling you right now, what are we supposed to do with these promises? They help us to live right now. Even though we haven't received it yet, they help us to live right now. God's promises are given for our benefit right now. Even though we haven't received them yet, we know God's going to follow through on them. These wonderful, extravagant promises, and they're meant to help us right now. Right here in the day-to-day and the moment-by-moment, those promises that God has given us, they help us. They're fuel for the Christian life. And so we will return to that idea later in the sermon. We're going to turn to our passage now. Our passage picks up immediately after the 9th plague. And you'll see here that the 10th plague is only announced at this point. It hasn't actually happened yet. All the previous plagues, we see it takes about half a chapter to go through the previous plagues. But here, it's chapters 11 and 12. 12 is particularly long. And you'll see why when we get there. And so what I'm saying here in chapter 11 is that it's a continuation of the previous scene. In the previous scene, Moses is in Pharaoh's throne room, and so nothing has changed. Moses hasn't left Pharaoh from before at the end of the 9th plague. But before Moses goes ahead and declares that the plague is going to come, these first 3 verses in Exodus 11 are a little background information for our benefit. They're a little background information. It's just Moses giving a little aside. Oh, by the way, God told me this. Verse 1, the Lord said to Moses, this is what God had told Moses before, yet one more plague I will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Again, there have been 9 plagues so far. Each of them, they've been increasing in severity and intensity, and they've all been building up to this final one, the 10th plague. And afterward, he says, he will let you go from here. What God has promised to Moses and Israel will come true after this 10th plague. What God has been demanding of Pharaoh over and over again will finally happen. And this is how it's going to happen. Pharaoh will not negotiate any longer. If you recall what's been going on so far, Pharaoh's been trying to wheel and deal. He hasn't given in, and he's been trying to get, he's been giving in a little bit, but not all the way. He's been trying to get his own way. He's been trying to grant the Israelites a partial release. Yeah, you can go, but you have to come back, that kind of thing. He's not going to do that anymore. Rather, what he's going to do is when he lets you go, he will drive you away completely. He's going to send you away. This is the same person who's hardened his heart against the Lord at least 9 times before. The same person who's overseen the destruction of his country, of his nation, from water, land, and sky. In all directions, he's seen the destruction of his nation, and he's kept hardening his heart. This is the same person who's been exalting himself over the people and over God, refusing to humble himself before the Lord. But finally, after this plague, the Pharaoh will send God's people away completely. And this is not something that anyone humanly could have imagined. That Pharaoh would do such a 180, a complete reversal. No one could have seen that coming. No one could have imagined that it would be this way. But of course, we serve a God who is sovereign. God orchestrates all things, including the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, so that he will accomplish his purposes. And what is his purpose here? What promise is he giving? Pharaoh is going to let you go completely. Now, there is one instruction in our passage that God has Moses relay to the people. And it's not an instruction that you would expect. In verse 2, God says to Moses, "Speak now in the hearing of the people, that they ask every man of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor for silver and gold jewelry." This is the instruction. Have the people, the Israelites, go ask their neighbors. When they say their neighbors, it doesn't mean one another. It means their Egyptian neighbors for silver and gold jewelry. Just to give a little context, or just some background information I think might be important, is like silver and gold jewelry. Maybe some of you guys, I'm wearing gold jewelry right now, and it's like, it's of our personal wealth, it probably doesn't amount to that much in our modern context. But in those days, their silver and gold jewelry was a large part of their wealth. Have you guys ever seen pictures of ancient Egyptians? They're decked out in all sorts of beautiful gear, right? They didn't have cell phones and cars and things, and so they invested in the looking good part. Are you with me? That was a large part of their personal wealth. So what is God telling the Israelites to do? He's not saying, go to your closest friends, your relatives, and ask them for their most valuable possessions. Can you imagine going to your cousin or your friend? Can I have your engagement ring? Or at least a diamond? Can I have your car? And what would your friends and your family members say? Unless it's your mom or something, what they'll say is, no, I'll give you some food. I can give you a small gift. I can maybe give you $100. I'm not going to give you my engagement ring. I'm not going to give you my car, right? But God says here, ask your neighbors, not your Israelite neighbors, your Egyptian neighbors, the same people who have kept you enslaved for 400 years, the same people who have participated in the slaughter of your people, even your baby boys, the same people who have oppressed you for generations. Go ask them for their most valuable possessions, their gold and silver. A very, very bold ask. But just as with Pharaoh, God has sovereign control over the whole situation. Verse 3 says, and the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. In other words, God arranged it, God orchestrated it so that the Egyptians, when they were asked, were agreeable. Yeah, go right ahead. Who could have predicted this? Who could have even imagined it? Not only will the people of Israel be driven out of Egypt, but they will be sent out loaded up to the gills with gold, the gold and silver of Egypt. They will not go out as paupers, poor people with nothing in their pockets. They'll come out of Egypt with virtually all the wealth of Egypt, and it will be given to them, willingly given to them, when they asked. In verse 4, we return now to Pharaoh's throne room. That was an aside given to Moses for our benefit, but in verse 4, we return to the throne room. And just to give you a little context, only moments before verse 4, in the final verses of chapter 10, Pharaoh, I want to say Pharaoh's had enough, but Pharaoh's had enough all along. But Pharaoh takes it to another level. He levels a death threat against Moses. He says, get away from me. Take care never to see my face again, for on the day that you see my face, you shall die. On the one you can understand why Pharaoh says that, because Moses has been delivering messages of these plagues coming 9 times so far. But on the other hand, it's not Moses who's doing it. Moses is God's messenger. And secondly, that's not how you treat messengers. Messengers are not the ones doing it. And also, this is a prophet of God. This is not just some guy. And so Pharaoh definitely is crossing a line here. In any case, Moses, he receives this death threat. He responds angrily as he does. He says, "Have it your way. I won't see your face." But before he does take off, he has one final message for Pharaoh, from Yahweh's lips to his ears. This is in verse 4. "Thus says the Lord, about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt, and every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl, who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle." In this final plague, Yahweh, the Lord God, he will not use any intermediaries. In all the previous plagues, he used creatures. Remember the first plague, he used blood. The second plague, he used frogs. The next 2, insects. Then he used diseases for the next 2. He used various weather patterns, another insects again. The 9th plague, he used heavenly bodies. He turned off the lights. This time, he's not going to use anything. This time, God himself is going to come down. He will come in judgment. There's not going to be any use of a mediator or an intermediary. I think it's interesting. That takes it to another level. And who's going to be affected here? Every family of Egypt is going to be affected, whether it's the household of Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world. His household is going to be affected. It's going to go all the way down to the lowest servant girl. And if that weren't enough, this is how thorough it's going to be. It's going to even also affect the cattle. What did the cattle do? Well, their firstborn are also going to die. Everyone, all will be affected. But of course, as I just said, the judgment will fall in particular upon the firstborn. Now, we're outsiders to this affair. In other words, we weren't involved in this, and so we're looking from the outside in, and we might wonder, why does God strike in particular the firstborn? And that also implies children, of course, right? Firstborn children. What did they do to deserve this? For example, Pharaoh was bad, but what did Pharaoh's son do? Why does the judgment fall on him rather than on Pharaoh? Moreover, why does the judgment fall on every family, even the poor, even the powerless people in Egypt, and even the cattle? Cattle had nothing to do with keeping Israel in Egypt. But there is one clue here about God's intentions in the next verse. He says in verse 6, "There shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as has never been, nor ever will be again." There shall be a great cry. And this is not merely a description of the great wailing and weeping and the gnashing of teeth that's going to result after this plague. It's also a callback. It recalls, when you hear these words, there's going to be a great cry. It calls back to earlier in the book of Exodus. Earlier in the book of Exodus, there was crying going on, but it wasn't done by the Egyptians. Who did the crying earlier in Exodus? Do you remember? It's the people of Israel. You guys recall that Israel, they have been slaves for many generations, 400 years. Back in chapter 2, the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Even before that, in chapter 1, the previous Pharaoh instituted a policy, we call it a policy, of genocide. which was to be enforced by all Egyptians. The law was, he gave the law to his people, all Egyptians. If you see a Hebrew boy, what? Kill it. Throw it in the Nile. Throw him in the Nile, excuse me. All Egypt was actually culpable, not just Pharaoh. And the people of Israel have been crying out for a long time. And so God's judgment is this. Now Egypt is going to let out a great cry. Egypt is now going to sow what it has reaped. God will come down, God will personally come down and execute justice. The judge of the world will come, and he will execute justice upon Egypt for all the horrors that they inflicted upon Israel. But there's more. Why? You might, okay, we can get that there is justice here. It's what Egypt did to Israel, this is more than fair, okay? But there's more here. Why does God intervene in history? It's very interesting here. Like I said, God is not just sending armies or plagues, but God is personally coming down and stepping into history, coming down into the stage of history, not just from heaven above, but into our presence on behalf of Israel. And when you think about it, when you think about even what's going on right now in the world, but throughout the history of mankind, there have always been injustices. There have always been slavery, oppression, terrible things going on. Is Egypt the only oppressive regime in the history of the world? Are they the only people who've done terrible things to other people? No. There have been countless bad people and bad regimes, bad nations. So why does God break the pattern of history and personally come down in order to directly execute justice? What is so special about Israel? Well, back in chapter 4, God's message for Pharaoh was this: Israel is my firstborn son. And I say to you, let my son go, that they may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. Yes, God is the God of justice. But it's not, this plague here is not just about justice. It's more than that, it's personal. God is acting out of love. Love for Israel. That explains what he does here. God acts out of love for his firstborn son, Israel. Every firstborn in the land of Egypt will die because God will do whatever it takes in order to redeem, in order to free, in order to liberate his firstborn son. This plague, this judgment, yes, it's about justice, but it's also about love. And that's made even more clear in the next verse. Verse 7 says, "But not a dog shall growl against any of the people of Israel, either man or beast, that you may know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel." On the one hand, Egypt, they're going to feel the heavy hand of God inflicting his judgment upon them. You're going to feel that. But on the other hand, for Israel, no one and nothing, not even a dog, not even... Now, to us, dogs are cuddly creatures, but to them, dogs were kind of like rats. They were like scavengers, right? Not even a dog will bother the people of Israel. They will be peace. They will have peace, even while Egypt is going to be experiencing the exact opposite. And why? Because God makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. God does not treat everyone the same. Quite the contrary, God makes a distinction. It's the distinction between, let's say you have children. It's the distinction between your firstborn child You might think I was going to say, and your second-born child. No. It's the distinction between your firstborn child and the abuser and oppressor of your firstborn child. Are you going to make a distinction between these two people? Your child and the person who is messing with your child? Yes, you are going to make a distinction. And in the same way, God makes a distinction. For this person who's messing with your firstborn child, judgment. For your child, fatherly care and extravagant love. It's a radical distinction. Now, who could have seen this coming? Who could have imagined this? Not only will the people of Israel be driven away, not only will they exit Egypt fully loaded with all the wealth of Egypt, but also God will manifest his justice and his love to Israel by coming to execute this fearsome judgment against Egypt. Now, let me zoom out a bit now that we've looked at the text. Why are we studying Exodus? The reason we're studying Exodus, for one reason, is that Exodus is not ultimately about something that God did for a people far, far away in a time long, long ago. That's not what it's ultimately about. Yes, God did do these things for the people of Israel many thousands of years ago in that land far away. But ultimately, Exodus is about, and it foretells about something greater that God is going to do. That is, all the great promises and fulfillments of these promises in Exodus, they establish a pattern for how God is going to act later. They establish a pattern of how God makes promises and delivers. It's like Exodus is the first movie in a series. Now, typically, you have these movies, movies with sequels, with many sequels, they tend to have the same plot over and over again. And usually the first one's the good one, and then the second ones they're trying to make more money off of them. It's the same plot, but we've heard this plot before, and they get worse and worse. I'm not suggesting that the second movie is worse. What I'm saying, it's the same plot, but it's way better. Exodus is the first movie in this series. And there's going to be a second movie that Exodus is foretelling, which, unlike movies today, this is the better one, the second movie. So what does Exodus teach us? It teaches us, look at what an amazing Savior God is. And what can we expect in the sequel? Not something less than what God did in Egypt, but something even far greater than what he did in Egypt. So let us review. What do we see here in Exodus? We see a complete reversal from what we would expect or can see with our eyes. No one could have anticipated what God was doing. No one could have imagined what God was up to. All signs seem to point in the opposite direction, and yet God promises and fulfills such an extravagant salvation for the people of Israel. How much more does God promise for you, the people of God? Some clues from the New Testament. Now, I'm not going to fully explain these verses, but perhaps you're familiar with them from the Sermon on the Mount. The poor in spirit will receive the kingdom of God. When you consider that verse, the poor in spirit, you're not imagining or anticipating that they're going to receive such an amazing reward, the kingdom of God. Those who mourn shall be comforted. That's not what we expect. Those who mourn are going to be sad, and and it's the end of it. No, that's what we expect, but God says it's going to be the opposite. The meek will inherit the earth. The meek, this is not completely what meek means, but we think of someone who's kind of quiet. That's not what meek means, but It's not someone who's brash and boastful, who's trying to go and take over the world. And yet, it's not the brash and boastful and the ambitious who are going to inherit the earth. No, it's going to be the meek, the one who's not trying to get everything for himself. God's promises overturn what we can see with our eyes and what we anticipate, humanly speaking. This is the nature of God's promises. There is coming such a reversal that no one will have seen if not for the testimony of the scriptures. And that should give us hope. That should give us hope to persist in the Christian life. And God calls us to be poor in spirit. God calls us to be meek. And we do that in faith, trusting that God is the one who's going to actually overturn everything. Not only do we see a great overturning of expectations, our passage shows us that God over-delivers on his promises. He over-delivers. That is, he does far more abundantly than all that we ask or think. Likewise, in the New Testament, these are the kind of promises that God makes to his people. I hate to use these adjectives. Amazing, incredible, remarkable. We know what they mean, but they're so unspeakable, right? They don't really, they tell you that it's here, but what exactly? But many of the promises in the Bible, especially in the New Testament, that's all that we can. That's the level of description that we can give it. Because it is beyond our imagination, truly. It's beyond what we can describe. And so, again, here are some descriptions from the New Testament of what God promises to his people. 2 Corinthians 4:17 says, "There is an eternal weight of glory that is being prepared for his people." An eternal weight of glory. What is that? I can't tell you much more. There is, keep going, Romans 8:18. There is an incomparable glory that is to be revealed to us. It's incomparable. This is a little more specific in Ephesians chapter 2. In the coming ages, meaning for all eternity, God will show the immeasurable riches of his kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. For all eternity, God is going to show not just his kindness to us, but the riches of his kindness. And remember again, God over-delivers on his promises. 1 Peter 3:4 says, "There is an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you." Do any of you have an inheritance or anticipating an inheritance here? Maybe a trust fund, I don't know, some amount of money. The thing about those things, nice as they may be, they are, at the end of the day, they are perishable. They do become defiled. They do fade away. You can use it all up. But we have an inheritance that is not those things. It is so safe, it is so guaranteed, and it is kept in heaven for us. And this is a favorite of mine, 1 Corinthians 2:9. "No eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined what God has prepared for those who love him." You can't even imagine what God has prepared for us, for those who love him. Just like the Israelites, they had no idea what kind of salvation they were about to receive. Even more so, us, the people of God, we have no idea how glorious will be the coming salvation. Friends, such news is unbelievable. Well, it's literally too hard to believe. For one, because we don't even see it. And plus, why would God treat us this way? Why would God give us such extravagant promises? Does he give us such promises because, for example, we call ourselves Christians. Or perhaps you were born in a Christian home. That's why God gives you such extravagant promises. Or because you go to church. You're here at 11:30, that means you've got your ticket. Or is it because you're a pretty decent person? You haven't done any major crimes? You haven't committed any major sins? Is that why God gives us these extravagant promises? Or maybe it's this. Maybe it's because you believe the right things about God rather than the wrong things about God. Is that why God gives you these promises? Do any of these things that I listed qualify you to be a recipient of these promises of God? If you're paying attention, I hope you say, no, those things do not qualify you to be a recipient of God's promises. There's only one thing that can qualify you to be a recipient of such promises. You must be his son. And by that, I don't mean Israel. I mean Jesus Christ, the only one of whom God said from heaven, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." God would make these extravagant promises to only one person, to his only begotten Son. So how is it that God calls Israel his firstborn son? How is it that God calls us his children? Not because we are sons of God, daughters of God by nature or by birth, right? The testimony of the scriptures is clear. Ephesians 2 says that we are children of wrath by nature. No, we are not children of God by nature. We're the opposite. How do we become children of God? Only if we are found in him, that is, in Christ. Only if you are united to Christ by faith. Only if you are joined to Christ by receiving him as your Lord and Savior. Only if you belong to Jesus by faith are such promises for you. So it behooves me to ask you, are you united to Christ by faith? Have you received Jesus as Savior and Lord? Do you belong to Jesus? If you have not yet put your trust in him, I invite you to do it now. Do it now. But for those of you who do belong to Jesus, those of you who are joined to Christ by faith, and you are found in him, let me ask you, do these promises of God, I've only covered, just the top layer of an ocean of promises. We know the nature of these promises. There's a great iceberg underneath that we don't see. There's much more that we don't see. Do these promises, the promises of God, mean anything to you right now? Let me say it again. God's promises are not meant to be some sort of like optional things you know about in the Christian life. It's not like some sort of extra credit theology that you can get to, that you can study about if you're interested in that kind of thing. No, the promises of God are vital. They're fundamental in the Christian life. God's promises are not goodies for you if you're into that sort of thing. God's promises are not merely answers to Bible study questions that you pull out on a Friday evening and then you put away after the Bible study is over. Rather, God's promises are the substance of our faith. They are the precious fuel that help you to go on living for him. They're the things that we behold, in addition to Christ himself, of course, so that we can trust him and obey him in this life. All before we receive them in full when Jesus returns. Let's pray together. Lord, we thank you for this word that shows us what an extravagant promise giver and fulfiller you are. And we know that like the people of Israel in Exodus, we also have received such great and wonderful promises, and yet we stand on the other side of receiving them. We're still living in this life, but again, you've given us these promises to fuel our faith and to help us to live obedient lives, lives that are pleasing to you. So Lord, would you help us, Lord, not only to know your good promises to us, to know what kind of God you are, an extravagant giver of all good gifts, but that you would help us to hold firmly to the hope that we have. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.